Monica, I want to come back to you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Since you sort of get to make your own assignments, or at least I assume you do, because you're kind of a one-person bureau, as it were. Do you ever get flack when you say to your editors, I want to go cover this, or I want to go cover this in this particular way? And do you think that any of that's gendered, or are you sort of allowed to do what you think is appropriate?
Well, I've been deployed. I was deployed a lot last year to breaking news events in the hemisphere, and we have several reporters, both male and female, and I think really gender didn't play a role at all in who got deployed or not. It's it's basically in a 24 hours news network, the person who covers the story is basically who can get there first, and I think if you're a woman or a man, it doesn't really make a difference.
Okay. Let me step in for just a second and remind everyone that this is a live broadcast of Global Journalist on KBIA. We're broadcasting from the Reynolds Journalism Institute with a live audience that has been remarkably silent and a panel. With me in the studio is Saleem Solomon, Yuli, Mary Kay Blakely. By Skype, we have Monica Villamazar, and by phone, Gonaz Esifandere. What challenges and rewards have you encountered as a woman journalist or in your own workplace? Share your questions and comments. Join the conversation by giving us a call at 573-882-8925, or join our live chat at Global Journalist, that's all one word, .org. Now I really would like to get some questions.
Hi, I'm Byron Scott, and I want to thank Lee for being part of this remarkable event, this remarkable broadcast. I think among the points that really hit hardest with me in this early discussion is how journalism, which remains a "what have you done for me lately" kind of a profession, really has a cross-cultural divide that varies when we go from one country to another. I'm thinking, for example, that in the countries of the former Soviet bloc, ironically, many women were in leadership positions in the media in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the fall of communism, and not so much today. Interesting. And so a cultural kind of shock has taken over, kind of a backsliding, if you would, from that point of view. And I wonder if some of our speakers could tell us really what's been happening lately in their cultures.
Yuli, we want to start off?
I think when you're talking about this cultural difference, you have to look at the specific context in the country and what are the traditional values or expectations of women in the society. And take China, for example. I think when we talk about the stereotype for women, we have to think about what are the social expectations of women in China. So traditionally, I would say that the women in China are supposed to be like family-oriented. They have to take care of the kids, and they have to obedient to their family, to the husband who, make the living for the whole family. And women they do not have to be wealthy or earn a lot of money. They just have to have a stable job. And now this whole situation changed a little bit, but not so much. Now women are allowed to go to school. You can have an independent life. You can, be single if you want, if you choose to be, and you can have your own career. But still, if you choose to balance your life, personal life, with your career life, you're going to find a balance point. And a lot of my peers in the college, once they graduate, they realize if I want to balance my career with my family, I have to pick one side. And they pick the family side.
Gonaz, since you're on the phone, I'm going to kind of summarize this conversation and then ask how you respond to it.
Actually, I wanted to jump in and talk about the situation in Iran, where
Please.
About 50% of university graduates of journalism are women, but you don't see so many women working as journalists. One of the reasons is that Many of them are told not to do so because it's very dangerous for men and for women, but more for women. It's very interesting. The Iranian government has been promoting this image of a woman who's sitting at home doing homework, and waiting for her husband to come home. They don't like women who go out and work. And, for example, women journalists who would ask tough questions, that's not what they want. And if you look at the state television in Iran, women who are working there are always just news readers. They're not really asking any tough questions. They're not having any shows for themselves. And you don't see them bringing women to give analysis also. And recently, we have at least 3 or 4 women journalists who are currently in jail. I interviewed recently one woman. She's a prominent journalist, but we're not going to name her to not cause her more trouble. And she had been released recently, and she told me that even in prison, women journalists are facing more difficult conditions than men. And she said that interrogators, she said they hate us. They hate women who are working, women who are fighting for their rights, women who are trying to change the society. And she said, and you see that in the kind of sentences they issue for us or the way they treat us.
I see a lot of nods. Salam, you want to add on to that?
That is true. I completely agree with how the society somewhat what's expected of you once you go into the workforce and start working. You are supposed to balance having a family. You're expected to be, I guess, typical women, I guess. And so, especially if it's a very traditional society, you're not encouraged to continue your profession in that sense. And so, especially journalism, being outspoken, going out, speaking to people, presenting a news, seeking out information is somewhat abrasive, seen as something not traditional or something that's not expected of a woman, I guess, in a society that is very traditional. And so it's quite a challenge, but we have women, as I said before, Eritrea, most of the women, 30% of the women contributed to the independence of the country. So you would think that women would go back or still carry that tradition of independence, tradition of, strength. But you see that going down after independence, and that's kind of disappointing, but that is the challenge that most traditional societies face.
I would like to get some comments about this question from other members of the audience, but while you all are trying to get the microphone in your hands, Mary Kay, I noticed that of folks of our generation, my husband never gets asked how he's balancing his family and his work, and I think that's a difficult thing for this generation of students to realize.
It's been difficult, and it's difficult again. It's astonishing to me that we keep having to have the same debates, the same public debates over and over and over again. And I think it's partly because none of our institutions have changed either. When you were saying, Yuli, that you worked in the business beat, I was thinking a lot about how important it is to have women there, because we used to think of the business pages as the men's pages, and then there were the women's pages, and then there were the sports pages, and then there were the women's pages, and we divided everything by gender. And it's so important to have women looking at the economy to say, wait a minute, there's a whole huge layer of unpaid labor out there, and it's called motherhood. We raise the children, we make the meals, we can't even go into the reproductive cycle.
I'm going to throw it to a question, comment from the audience, and then Ganaz on the phone as well.
This is a question, not a comment. Lee, you mentioned earlier the sort of there, dear phenomenon. I think this is something that all of us in careers and sort of schooling have faced at some point or another. And it becomes sort of like the onus is on us not to appear strident when we're faced with this sort of like low-level insidious sexism. And I'm just wondering what kind of strategies any of you might have developed during your career to sort of cope with that.
Go for it.
I think it's having thick skin. Sometimes it's imperative that you learn how to develop a thick skin because let's say a man would say something to make you feel less than him, even though you'd have the same training and the same experience. But I personally look at it from a very competitive angle instead of gender. If you have that attitude, of course, that is the kind of strategy I think women should pursue, in my opinion.
Yuli, how'd you handle it?
The first word I came across is hardworking, hardworking, and hardworking. You have to prove yourself in the field because you are not a manager, you are not an editor, you are not the one who assigned something, to you. You didn't have this decision power. But you have to prove yourself over time that you have the ability, you have the knowledge to do something and to be equally treated with your male partners. So when this opportunity comes, be able to grab that and be able to communicate a lot with your editor or supervisor and be able to collaborate a lot with women maybe in the other newspaper, women who cover another beat, and to develop this friendship to mutually support yourself.
Gonaz, we've got you back on the phone, I hope.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, you just wanted to jump in.
Just about Iran, the point that despite the pressure, you see many women who are still working as journalists. And a few years ago, we had a few publications run by women. Women were editor-in-chief, executive managers, and everything, but they were shut down by the government. So you see now many women have turned to the web. They have their websites, which are actually very popular as news sources, but also as platforms for activism. That's where they've been very active. They've been pushing for their rights, and they've been also covering the news about the women's movement. And another thing that might be also interesting to know is that in Iran, the government, filters the internet, they block websites, and from time to time, they filter some words that are sort of sensitive for the establishment. And a few months back, one of the women activists told me that the word woman and women's movement was blocked in Iran. So people couldn't even search under women's movement.
I think in direct response to you, one of the things I learned is that you just have to be good at what you do. Mm-hmm. And after you do that the first 100 times, people kind of catch on. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that men have to do it 100 times, but I know they have to do it more than once. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just sort of, at least to me, it felt like a continual treadmill of having to prove myself, even when I thought but didn't I just do that yesterday? Mary Kay, you're saying yes.
I just so agree with that, Lee, because I think you do. In fact, when you asked your question, I was thinking you do have to eventually have confidence in your judgment and confidence that you're adding something, even while people are calling you names like strident, like inappropriate, like I always remember, and we were going to get the question all the time of divided loyalties. Are you a real female or do you care about your family? And I will never forget, Congresswoman Patricia Schroeder was asked that question, how could you be a politician and a mother? And she said, I have a brain and a uterus and they both work. Hello.
And on that wonderful note, I'm going to begin our close. Thanks for the applause, guys. I'd like to say thanks to our guests, Mary Kay Blakely, Salim Solomon, Yuli, Gonaz Eritrea, and Monica Vendemirzar. Thank you also to all of you in the audience. Our director is Travis McMillan, and audio by Pat Akers. The producers of Global Journalist are David Cawthon, Ryan Kreese, Jessica Popovec, and Tim Wall. Rebecca Wolfson and Stephanie Tabor is a production assistant. Special thanks to Pat Smith and all of the students in the Global Journalist class. This show will continue on, and you can still join us in on the conversation. Thank you. Good evening. This is Lee Wilkins for Global Journalist.